France and Britain issue a 12-hour ultimatum that all fighting must cease. Within hours of its expiration, Britain's warplanes are winging their way to Egypt, and its bombers attack 5 key cities in...
On the 29th of October 1956, Britain, France and Israel launched a joint military action against Gamal Abdel Nasser's Egypt. Tension had been building between Cairo and the Tripartite powers following Egypt's renationalisation of the Suez Canal, a direct challenge to London's control over the valuable waterway. Named Operation Musketeers, the aim was to regain control of the canal and contain the threat posed by the Egyptian president. However, during the run-up to the 1956 war, Britain's Chief of Staff Committee issued an instruction that if an order is given to carry out an operation to neutralise Israel's air force, even as they were waiting for the war on Egypt to begin, then that operation would be prioritised and a delay to the start of the Egyptian war would be acceptable. Why was Britain contemplating military action against Israel? On the 2nd of July 1954, bombs exploded in a post office in Alexandria, triggering concerns about the stability of Egypt. Initially, it was believed that either communists or Muslim Brotherhood cells were behind the attack. Later in July, bombs went off at the US Information Agency's libraries in Alexandria and Cairo, as well as a British-owned theatre. Israel's Defense Minister Pinchas Lavon gave a speech denouncing the attacks, arguing that Israel will act more aggressively to defend itself from its neighbours. Claiming that the group responsible was radical and posed a danger to Israel, he also put forward the case that the armistice line, which was the de facto border, was open to being challenged. However, on the 23rd of July, a bomber approached the British-owned Rio Cinema in Alexandria. His device went off prematurely. Not long after, 13 men and women were in Egyptian custody, and much to the surprise of the authorities, they were not communists or Muslim Brotherhood, but Egyptian Jews and Israelis. They belonged to Unit 131 under the control of Israel's military intelligence or Amman, who were seeking to weaken the credibility of the Egyptian government and keep Britain in Egypt. It became known as the Lavon affair and represented an uneasy tension between Britain and Israel. The American Central Intelligence Agency accused Tel Aviv of trying to wreck relations between the West and Egypt. Britain's relationship with both Zionism and Israel has always been difficult. While British policy supported and enabled the Zionist project to take over Palestine before 1948, in 1939 Britain adopted a white paper, a government policy document, that placed restrictions on Jewish migration into Palestine. Whitehall aimed to put an end to the Palestinian Arab Revolt, which began in 1936 and whose aim was to stop the Zionist takeover. The stemming of Jewish immigration into mandatory Palestine made Britain a target, and a wave of bombings, executions and attacks ensued. They included the King David Hotel bombing in 1946, which killed 91 people, the kidnap of British Army officers and other aggression. After Britain's withdrawal from Palestine in 1948, Israel formed a close relationship with London's imperial rival France. Despite losing India and Palestine, and with an era of decolonisation underway, Whitehall still thought of itself as an imperial power, albeit a lesser power than the United States and the Soviet Union. Influence over Egypt and Jordan was considered vital for the UK's national interests. In 1946, the UK granted Jordan independence, and in 1948, the two signed an alliance treaty. As the Cold War was underway, the stability of Jordan was a great concern to Western policymakers who feared it could fall under Soviet influence. Part of the treaty the UK signed with Amman included a defence pact in which Britain would ensure the Hashemite kingdom's security. Israel continued to attack its neighbours and carry out cross-border raids, both officially and covertly, after the end of the 1948 war, and the British Royal Air Force sometimes clashed with the Israeli Air Force, as London would carry out reconnaissance flights over Israeli bases. Despite tensions between the two, Britain continued to supply Israel with arms. Indeed, whenever Israel attacked Jordan, London would downplay or not publicly acknowledge anything had happened. However, by 1954, ignoring Israel's actions became harder as tension ramped up between Israel, Egypt and Jordan. The Lavon affair, which led to the execution of Israeli agents in Egypt, put Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion in the mood for revenge. On the 28th of February 1955, Israeli forces carried out a brutal massacre against Gazan civilians under the pretext that maps and documents were stolen from the Israeli military facility, as well as a cyclist being killed in Tel Aviv. Israel claimed infiltrators from the Egyptian-controlled Gaza Strip were responsible and so attacked. Anger from the international community forced Israel to come up with a new justification, and so it accused Egyptian soldiers of ambushing an Israeli patrol and said the massacre was a result of self-defense. But as the UK embassy in Tel Aviv said, the pretense deceived no one. And in a rare move, both the Soviet Union and the United States voted to censure Israel at the United Nations. But this did not stop Israel from carrying out cross-border attacks. In December 1954, a young Israeli man and woman infiltrated Jordan, and by February 1955 they failed to return to Israel. The UN partnered up with local Jordanian Bedouin to locate them, and soon after their bodies were found. There was no clear evidence about what happened to them, but upon announcement of the discovery of their bodies, Israel raided the West Bank, which was under Jordanian control, and kidnapped 6 random Bedouin. They killed 5 of them and released 1. Despite wanting to avoid military confrontation, as early as 1954, London began drawing up plans to destroy Israel's entire air force and key Israeli military and communication installations. As part of the secret preparation, 1 armoured squadron, which included 20 tanks and 100 men, were stationed in Aqaba, Jordan. Protecting Jordan was not the only consideration. Britain also started to look at the Gaza Strip too. In 1955, Israeli forces made manoeuvres within the UN-controlled demilitarized zone in Gaza's Al-Awajah, sparking fears of an Israeli military invasion. In April 1955, an alarmed US State Department told the British Foreign Office that both countries should consider taking military action against Israel to halt Israeli expansion into Gaza. Plans to attack Israel were put on the shelf after Gamal Abdel Nasser, president of Egypt, nationalized the Suez Canal in 1956. Prior to this, Nasser bought arms from the communist Czechoslovakia, which further alienated the West. Ironically, it was the Lavon affair which caused Cairo to clash with the West. While Nasser was part of secret peace talks with Israel, US and Great Britain, Israel's decision to get revenge on Egypt and carry out a massacre in Gaza caused Palestinians to protest the failure to protect their lives. The pressure forced Nasser to pull out of the secret negotiations. This sent him on the path towards the 1956 Suez War, which would put a stop to a British planned assault on Israel.